You guys, MonsterVerse is dead. Yeah, those are the comments I've been getting recently, and we're gonna talk about it, guys, because personally, I don't think the game's dead. And a little sneak peek, I have some insider information from the owner herself, so we're gonna talk about it in today's video and read some Reddit threads about people basically talking about how the game is quote unquote dead and how the devs quote unquote abandoned the game. And thankfully, because I do have a direct line of communication with developers of this game, I was able to ask them questions that I'm curious about and to get clarification so that I can then share that clarification with you guys. So let's get straight into it. Now, if you guys don't know, I've advertised this game pretty heavily. I've never been compensated for advertisement, so I want to make that very clear. It's always just been my own opinions, and a bonus of that was being able to communicate directly with the developers, which I think is a really valuable asset to have. Now, with that in mind, I've seen so many people doom posting about this game, especially Twitter trolls. I find a lot of people were really preying on the downfall of this game, and I do have to say, I will be a little bit critical in this video because I do think there are some things that could have been clarified or rectified ahead of time, and I really do think, like I've said about my Royal High videos, that communication is the cornerstone of good game development, and I feel like communication here was a bit lacking, so we will get into that. But I want to go ahead and read this Reddit thread to you guys and go over the information I found out from the owner directly that I don't think has been shared publicly yet, so I'm very excited to share that with you guys. Now, I am going to hide this person's username, not because I don't want to necessarily credit them, but because I feel like this is a negative post and I don't want people harassing them for having an opinion. So, and also I am going to be picking it apart a little bit, so we'll get into it. But basically they write, this game is dying. We have to admit it, MonsterVerse is dying, and it's dying fast. The last update was around the start of December, and the devs have gone radio silent about the game since, besides some minor bug fixes. Which, very quick little side note, the last update was not at the start of December. They were updating even on Christmas Day, trying to fix bugs. So I get, maybe they're trying to refer here to a bigger update, I guess, is what they're trying to say. I'm not quite sure. But regardless, I definitely do think that there is some misrepresentations here, or maybe just misunderstandings, because there was updates literally on Christmas Day and other days where they were trying to fix bug problems during the holiday season. So that is unfortunately not correct, and I do think it's a little bit harmful to be spreading that narrative. But I understand, I think what they're trying to say is that there wasn't any big gameplay updates. But it is, again, important to clarify that when you're posting this. I only see it at 60 to 100 players a day when it used to peak at 10 to 20k. It's honestly so sad. I want to hear y'all's thoughts. Which I understand the discrepancy or the change in player counts, but I do want to clarify that the 20,000 player count was like quite literally only during the launch week to my recollection, and then after that kind of tapered off a little bit, and that is to be expected. With any game, when they have a big update, they're going to have a massive influx of players, and there's a lot of players who want to try and play MonsterVerse, especially, I will clarify, trolls. There was a lot of people who were trying to make videos comparing it to other games like Royal High, and were being very critical of the game. And so I do think that was part of the reason why the game's player count was so high, was because it wasn't just fans playing the game, it was also people just trying to figure out what the game was, it being recommended to new players because it was new, and then also people who were trying to make a point about why the game is quote unquote bad. So I do think that was a reason why the player counts were so high. It is to be expected that player counts would stabilize and go down to a more consistent number after the game was released. So I think that's to be expected, but again, I understand that people want the game to be getting tons of visits. Now this person mentions, well, ever since someone mentioned how there's only one scripter for the game and Peach's being in denial about the whole situation, it just feels hopeless at this point, and this sentiment is becoming more and more common with every post in this subreddit. Like the other commenter said, there's really nothing we can do. Which I'm a little bit confused here. What is Peach in denial about? Maybe I missed a chapter, you guys let me know in the comment section below. But I think part of sharing that there's only one scripter was to clarify that, hey guys, we can't get an update out in 2 seconds and pull it out of our butt if we only have one person working on it. As an example of how much work goes into game development, just take Royal High as an example. They have been working on the new set for the Everfriend season, and that has been something that's been worked on for a long time to my understanding, and they've been having people trying to basically, I guess, make the set compatible with different toggles and stuff like that, and that has taken them a couple weeks, right? And so I do think it's important to know, at least from when they announced it, I'm sure it started before that, but I think it's important to acknowledge that even a massive game like Royal High that has lots of different scripters, lots of different 3D modelers, tons of people working for them, they still need time to do this sort of stuff and to make sure their game is compatible with different players and stuff like that. And so I think it's a little bit bizarre to expect a game with one scripter to be able to behave faster than a game that has more scripters. But again, I understand that maybe people don't have that context, and I think maybe it's just a lack of understanding of how much effort goes into development, but that's just my thoughts. This person says, which is so unfortunate. I wish they realized they should have either waited to release or caption their game in alpha and didn't let people use their real money on it yet. Bloxburg was in beta for years, but it actually had gameplay all that time. MonsterVerse is nowhere near beta, and extremely obvious the devs bit off way more than they can chew. I think most everyone would have been fine if they waited another year to release the actual content. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this mess today, which I understand the sentiment, but guys, based even just my own channel and comments I've gotten, there was no way they could have gotten away with waiting a year to release this. The backlash they got for just delaying an update by like a couple hours was absurd. Like, people can be very, very entitled, and it was insane. So I think if they would have delayed the game by another year, it would have caused a lot of issues. And I do want to clarify too that a game being released isn't solely just about the game getting out there. It's also about getting a return on investment. And to my understanding, based on the conversations I've had with Peach, there is a huge financial investment on her part to get this game off the ground. It was a passion project, right? It was something that she had dreamed of for quite a long time, alongside some other developers, obviously, that have worked at either discounted rates or have contributed to the game astronomically with their work, right? And so I do think it's important to recognize that at the end of the day, you could say, oh, you should just take more time on it. But for some people, that isn't an option. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to necessarily defend all the glitches and bugs, because to a degree, it's made me a little bit agitated too. But I do think it's important to recognize that at the end of the day, these aren't millionaires. These people don't have just endless amounts of money, and it costs money to be able to hire people to work on a game. And I think the kind of issue, from what I can understand, is that people want all this gameplay, but they don't want to have to wait for the game to generate revenue to pay for that gameplay. You know what I mean? And so I'm not saying the game's running out of money. That's certainly not what I'm saying. I think they've been very, very successful. But I do want to clarify that it's really, I think it's very difficult to expect a game to be fully functional right upon its release without it having generated any income or revenue, aside from early access, people paying for that stuff, or people donating to the game, which are all optional, right? There was no charges or any income coming in that was guaranteed, right? So it was really all up to the devs to come up with money, the owner to do personal investments and stuff like that. And there's a lot of work that goes into game development, especially when it comes to funding it, a self-funded project. And so I do think a self-funded project versus a game that maybe is already established and has investors or has a toy line, stuff like that, they're very different. And I see a lot of people, specifically in the subreddit, comparing the two, and in my opinion, they just aren't comparable. However, what I will agree with on this commenter's post was, personally, I do agree that maybe the mislabeling the game was, a mistake. I don't think it was intentional at all. I think a lot of people are trying to paint it as this malicious thing that, oh my god, they labeled it as a beta and they were trying to do that to get rid of the game or to cause people to spend money in the game just to snatch it away from them and all. No. I really don't think that's the case. I think this is really just people being kind of grammar police and be like, oh, you should have called it an alpha. Well, technically, at the end of the day, personally, I think a lot of kids wouldn't even understand what alpha meant in the first place. Not saying that they shouldn't have labeled it that way because people don't understand, but I do think maybe it came from a space of just not quite recognizing that a game, some people would interpret the game as not being in a stage where it could be called a beta. I think that from what I've read, a lot of people seem to have different definitions of what beta means, and I look at the dictionary and there's even contradicting definitions throughout different dictionaries, so it's a little bit tricky to identify, but I do agree with this person that maybe stuff shouldn't have been put up for sale. I think that was an important thing to note because I think a lot of people purchased Vim and different game passes with the impression that the game would be developing a little bit at a faster rate than it currently is. And unfortunately, I feel like some players feel a little bit frustrated that they spent money and some of the features and assets that they have still can't be used. However, I do want to clarify that the Game Pass has had disclosures on whether or not the Game Pass could be used currently or not, and that's why some Game Passes were heavily discounted. And so if people didn't read that description and, expected the Game Pass to be working the very next week, I do think that's kind of like a user error type thing. But personally, if it was my choice, I wouldn't have sold any Game Passes during the initial launch when there was quite a few bugs, because I feel like it kind of just added more pressure for the devs to fix bugs for the game passes and the game itself if there was any bugs, right? And so altogether, I think it could have been managed a bit better, but at the same time, going back to my original point, I think there has to be a balance between game development and earning income so that you can reinvest that money back into the game and work on the game to the fullest potential, right? Now, there was this post that went out actually a couple days ago that a lot of you guys didn't see. And I do want to clarify, this post actually went out after I had the opportunity to message the owner of MonsterVerse directly, Peach. And I just said, actually, I'll read my message. I'm not going to read hers though, but just because, personally, I don't believe in sharing DMs unless you've asked people directly, like, hey, is it okay if I do this? I'm sure it's implied that I could, but I don't want to. I said, hi, Peach, hope you're doing well. I understand you're busy working on some stuff, so no pressure to answer right away. I was wanting to take a video about the MonsterVerse to help sustain hype and the player base. There's been some user complaints about lack of communication in the Discord server and have been commenting under my videos asking for answers. Is there anything I'm able to share regarding updates or current plans? Just want to do my best to help support the game while maintaining trust within my viewer base. Thank you. Which, the reason I mentioned trust here was because I was getting some comments from players being like, why would you advertise this game and the game's not doing anything anymore? Which, guys, first of all, I'm not paid to advertise this game. Any video I've ever made about MonsterVerse has been my own opinion. So I think some people seem to think that I'm associated with the game. Technically, I'm in the influencer program, which the only thing it gives me is a direct line of communication. That is it. So I'm not compensated. I don't make money. I don't get any special treatment. Like, that's that. I guess aside from the communication, if you want to call it special treatment. But that's basically the perks that I have of being in the program, which I was invited to after I had already made like 3 videos about the game itself. So I do want to clarify, I've never been paid to say or do anything for the game. However, I do also want to clarify that because of that, I don't have any answers or necessarily sneak peeks into stuff that you guys don't have unless I directly ask the owner, which I have on my friends list, right? And the owner responded, which I'm not going to share their message, basically just talking about how they're going to be working on stuff, and they've really been trying to kind of pace themselves and work on updates and not release updates before they're ready, which I think is a very good move. Now, something I do see a lot of people saying, and I think is a valid criticism, is that a lot of people have said, hey, why was nothing said? Why was there no communication? And up until about 3 days ago, there hadn't been, which I do want to obviously pay attention to, because I always preach about communication, and I'm not going to not talk about communication just because it's a game that I'm associated with. I definitely do think there was lacking communication, right? There was tons of updates during the Christmas season and developers working overtime during the holidays to try and make the game perform well and to try and get rid of bugs. And I feel like after the holidays, my perception of it is that people just got burnt out. There's a lot of backlash of people just being like, more. And the devs spent time away from their families working on this game. And then I think after the holidays, they were like, oh, we can breathe. And then they just want to take a moment to collect themselves. I do agree that there could have been more communication. I certainly think there should have been maybe an announcement that went out just to obviously make players understand that, hey, we're not abandoning the game. Because I do feel like the radio silence concerned quite a few players. And I did see some Reddit threads, people being like, oh my God, the game is like closed. Like they took all our money. They're never going to update it. That's not what's happening here. However, I can understand why people may come to that conclusion because there wasn't clear and transparent communication that, hey guys, we're taking a step back, our announcements or stuff might be a little bit later than usual, because to my understanding there's still going to be updates every week, but then it kind of got quiet after Christmas time and there wasn't any sort of announcements about big updates. So I can understand why people would be concerned, and obviously rightfully so. I was also concerned, and that's why I messaged Peach directly, because I'm like, hey, is something wrong? Like, are you okay? Everything's fine. Obviously they're just working on 10 different assets, and I do have some context from a post that was posted by one of their team members that writes, for those worried about the state of the game, which this was posted after I messaged Peach. So I don't know if it was because I messaged her, because I was getting comments, people accusing me of supporting a scam. I don't know if that's why they posted this or they were planning to post it anyways. Don't know. But it writes, for those worried about the state of the game, hello lovely ghouls, we're still working on the game and it isn't in a hiatus nor dead, so don't worry. Ironic considering the concept of MonsterVerse is that, well, you died. We truly just decided to take a step back in terms of socials and focus on the game's development before showing anything new. We want to make sure everything is the way we want before any update announcement too. Like said before, this year we are back with tons of energy and we can't wait to show all the hard work that's been going on behind the scenes. With love, the MonsterVerse team. So something I want to clarify as well is that throughout, the server, there has been staff members have been making comments and stuff about the development of the game. The same staff member said, we truly learned from last year, which I think is referring to how last year there was so much public pressure to release updates and that the dev team just didn't have enough resources to be able to produce them without bugs quick enough. And so that led to some updates being released that had pretty heavy amounts of bugs or certain devices not being compatible with the game and people getting upset. And so this year it sounds like they're really trying to pace themselves, which I think is the best choice a game can make. Obviously that means that you get updates slower, but personally, I would prefer getting an update with very little bugs over something that you quite literally cannot play, and then you get excited to play it and you literally can't because of bugs. So I definitely do value a game taking more time to try and make sure that every update they do is compatible with devices and different users. They also say, I swear things are being worked on, but we want to make sure everything works before showing. We don't want to do promises, then deliver things that look unfinished or aren't to our standards, which is another thing. I saw MonsterVerse had gotten quite a lot of criticism for, I guess, not delivering what people had expected when it came to certain updates. Like people were upset that there were bugs or glitches or clothes were clipping or things like that, or tutorials were bugging out, stuff like that. And I can understand that obviously this game was very highly hyped up. I think a lot of people are very excited for this game and people still are excited for it. But personally, I think it's a really good, again, step that they're taking kind of a step back and they're trying to make sure that anything that they present to the public is something that is almost ready to be published so that players don't get impatient, players don't feel like they're being cheated out of something, and that they can actually deliver the things they're advertising, which I think is really important for sustaining consumer, obviously, trust between the game and Roblox players, and also, just facilitating clear communication. I definitely do agree with people who shared the sentiment that they're frustrated that there wasn't communication up until January 19th. I understand that, and I think that's a valid take to obviously take on. Personally, with me just being so busy with stuff in real life, I hadn't really been paying a ton of attention, so I didn't even realize that there hadn't been a ton of updates up until I was getting a ton of comments about it on my MonsterVerse videos, and that's when I looked into it. And I am very grateful that obviously the owner who's very busy took time out of their day to respond to my questions and was able to clarify like some of the stuff with the game. And I shared what I could, but obviously I think, you know, privacy is something that's really important, and I'm not going to be like posting people's DMs and stuff. However, they did clarify that the game is still in development. There's no chance or, you know, thought that they're going to stop developing the game. However, they're just trying to obviously make sure that anything they produce is high quality, and I think that's a really valuable kind of mindset to have. Even if your development team is small, it may mean that some updates take longer to get out than others, but personally I value quality much more over quantity. I don't know about you guys. Let me know your thoughts down below though, and I will see you guys next time. And for all the details or updates on the game's development, I'd recommend you guys join their Discord server. I'll link it down below so you guys can easily join it, because that's where I get all my information aside from the MonsterVerse Reddit. Which, side note guys, I was scrolling Reddit last night just trying to find a video topic for today, and 2 people were like, careful, Pommy lurks in the Reddit. And I kind of wanted to comment, but I'm like, because they're kind of trash talking me, but that's okay. That's okay. And I'm not lurking, I'm just reading. There's a difference. But anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!